Hello everybody, Justin Joseph here as Editor-in-Chief of ProjectCreed.com, and today I have a treat for every one of you FPS lovers out there. If you own a PlayStation 3, you should make it a mission to pick this game up for the holiday season. If you don't, and maybe perhaps because Metal Gear Solid 4 just wasn't enough, allow my reactions to Insomniac Games' Resistance 2 to convince you otherwise. This game is nothing short of amazing, and I'll tell you why right now. If you haven't played the PS3 launch title Resistance Fall of Man, I suggest you lower your volume for a few seconds because I'm about to spoil that game's ending. Anyway, Resistance 2 picks up a couple years after Fall of Man leaves off. Nathan Hale somehow managed to survive the total obliteration of the final Chimeran tower stronghold located in the heart of England, so the alien race has been pushed out of the country. That was in 1951, but now it's 1953, and Hale has returned home to the United States of America. However, not all is quiet on the Western Front, or even Eastern for that matter. The Chimera are more pissed off than ever, and they've set their eyes directly on the US as a result. Before the American military could even prepare, several cities have already been laid to waste, and now it's up to Hale, as a member of a group known as the Sentinels, to push back the Chimeran threat. This team of soldiers is special though, because like Nathan, they too have Chimeran DNA running through their veins, and have natural resistance to complete transformation. Nathan Hale is a Lieutenant Sentinel, and more specifically, in charge of Echo Squad. What I just described certainly sets up an interesting premise, but sadly it never lives up to the campaign's epic proportions. For one, Rachel Parker, the female narrator from the first game, is nowhere to be found here. I thoroughly enjoyed how she presented the plot with just enough information to keep things mysterious, but sadly that technique is never realized here. Instead, Hale has a great deal more spoken dialogue, which makes things a little awkward at first just because of how much of a mute he was before. His interactions with teammates Capelli and Warner may be emotional from time to time, but outside of that, you won't be playing the campaign for the story. If anything, the conclusion is an absolute joke because it's so blatantly obvious that Insomniac will soon be at work on Resistance 3 if they aren't already underway. Thankfully, the plot is the weakest aspect of Resistance 2 because everything else is absolutely top-notch, despite any flaws. And don't worry, I'll discuss as much as I can given my time limit here. From a technical standpoint, Resistance 2 is an audiovisual powerhouse. If you have a quality HD TV, and perhaps even a surround sound setup to complement it, you wouldn't possibly be disappointed. Insomniac knew they had to capitalize on this to compete with the likes of Gears of War 2 and Call of Duty 5, and they succeeded in every way. The Chimera look freakier and more sinister than before. The Sentinels are impressively detailed and animate perfectly. The scale of the game is bound to drop some jaws, considering it at times surpasses what so many millions saw in the film Independence Day. Then to top it all off, the mission environments look incredible. Sure, you might run into some less than stellar textures and a couple issues with frame rate here and there, but if there ever was to be a game besides Metal Gear Solid 4 to showcase what the PS3 is truly capable of, Resistance 2 is that candidate. I haven't even said anything about the audio yet either. The music is a bit underwhelming, sort of like before, although it is a bit more noticeable this time, so props to the developers there. Other than that small quip, prepare to hear unbelievable weapon sounds, guns and explosives alike, very well done voice work, and of course, sensory overload thanks to the chaos produced by this incredible war. Okay, now for the always important gameplay, which just so happens to be another area where Resistance shines. First off, the game plays much more like Call of Duty 4 and 5, in that precision aiming has been moved from R3 to L1, and I prefer that so much more than that clicking nonsense. I also love that Insomniac cut us some slack from the first Resistance and instituted more checkpoints. I felt they were too far between in Fall of Man, but now the balance is pretty well perfect. What's also just about perfect is the weapon selection. Every gun from Fall of Man returns, including the Carbine, Bullseye, Far Eye, and Auger. Introduced are the Magnum, which carries exploding rounds, the Marksman, a hybrid semi-auto sniper rifle, the Wraith, an intimidating chain gun, the game's interpretation of the BFG, the plasma cannon, and so much more. My favorites are easily the Marksman and Auger though. With the former, you have effective hip and mid-range fire that comes in 3-round bursts, and a secondary function that sends an electric shock ball through the air. The Auger has also been upgraded. You can deploy a shield that only your gun's ammo can pass through still, but now you can see enemies through all surfaces with the weapon's X-ray vision, which is perfect given that the rounds travel through anything. Heck, I'll even compliment the Magnum for basically being a mini rocket launcher, which definitely comes in handy in certain situations. Resistance 2 is just a bloody fun game to play no matter what gun you end up developing an attraction to. I have a couple criticisms to throw out there though. You see, I got my butt handed to me in the original Resistance, and that was just on the medium difficulty. Resistance 2 is a good deal easier on the same setting, which is what allowed me to complete the campaign in about 8 hours. I'm not saying everybody wants a challenge out of this game, but if you did, chances are you'd have to start right off on the hardest difficulty just to reach Fall of Man's medium setting. Somewhere in between would have been more ideal, but oh well, what can you do? The other issue I saw was with the AI. I realize that other critics out there have praised it to the ends of the earth, but I don't see things the way they do. While I fully admit that my squad saved my life on a couple good occasions, it really seemed like their intelligence was a sort of 50-50 thing. What I mean by that is that they would either help me a lot to take down the Chimera, or just sit or stand there staring into space like someone just erased their minds. Needless to say, I died at least once every time that happened, and I didn't like it. Okay, now for the online multiplayer that's been hyped since the game was announced. It is indeed true that co-op supports up to 8 players, and competitive allows between 2 and 60 participants. Talk about insane. In my opinion though, co-op is where the fun is at. The scenarios that play out actually directly coincide with what goes on during the main campaign. They simply have nothing to do with Nathan Hale. They're more behind the scenes sort of deals. Either way, it's incredibly awesome to work with other players to eliminate wave upon wave of Chimera, as you'll see every type except the legendary Leviathan that you encounter in the Chicago mission. There are 3 initial classes to choose from: Soldier, Medic, and Special Ops, and each have very distinct strengths and weaknesses. To me, having a mix of each is ideal for any team, but obviously experimentation is always fun. Plus, everything you do individually is awarded experience points, which can be redeemed for new weapons, items, and berserker powers. With regards to the competitive modes, you have free-for-all deathmatch, team deathmatch, skirmish, and core. Now in my case, I'll always go back to co-op, simply because I seem to have lost my touch with arcade-style FPS multiplayer. That's obviously not the game's fault, so I can't place blame on anyone but myself, but those of you who thrive on these types of online matches could have a field day. Just bear in mind that if you're on a small or medium map, you probably won't want more than 30 people in the match at once. It just becomes too crazy and uninteresting in that respect. The larger maps, however, are very well suited for that 60-player cap, and even though such matches are still crazy, they're more enjoyable because of all the backup you can work with. You don't really work with classes in competitive though. You simply alter the configuration of your human or Chimeran profile. Resistance 2 does things a little differently here, allowing you to change your weapon loadout and berserker power on the fly, so you can, in theory, have a different setup for each time you respawn, and that's just plain cool given all the guns and powers available. Alright, that's really all I have time for, so if you want to know more intricate details, please check out my full written review on the Sony division of ProjectCWe.com. But of course you want to know what I've scored Resistance to, and I'll go right ahead and say that the game isn't quite elite in my eyes, but pretty bloody close. A 9.4 out of 10, resulting in a well-deserved gold medal. Thanks for tuning in to another Project CWE video review for this holiday season. Our coverage continues over the course of the next several weeks, so strap yourselves in and join us for the ride. I'll see you soon.